Hola, SAP developers. Welcome to this session, part of the TOEFL 2023 integration track. This session kicks off the last week of the integration track, and we'll be talking about migrating to SAP Integration Suite. Today, we have Daniel, who is an integration expert and product owner of Figaf, an SAP partner. And he will be telling us about how we can leverage Figaf tools to migrate your integrations from SAP PI to SAP Integration Suite. Without any further delay, hola, Daniel, over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here. It's such a pleasure to talk here, and I think that a lot of customers are currently considering, so how do we migrate? How do we make the transition as easy as possible? Because I think that is what most are looking for, making it as fast and effortless to be doing the migration. And hopefully I'll have some ideas here that would simplify this setup for you. And if you have questions along the way, put them into the chat, and obviously there may be some delay, so I'll try to cover those, and we'll cover them at the end of the session. So I will be sharing a few ideas during the session. We'll talk about assessment, we'll talk about migration, and how you can actually customize your migration. And hopefully we'll talk a little about how to get started with this. But let's just, we created the Figaf is about creating a tool that empowers integration developers, making it as easy for them to develop integration as possible. And we have a number of different tools that we have added to this. And I think the main one is the PI to Integration Suite migration that we added as a part of this. Cool. So a lot of times when we talk about, okay, we are moving to the cloud, why not leverage the platform to the fullest? And I fully agree. The ideal way would be that you would redevelop all your integrations in a new way, in a new platform, to leverage the platform and the capabilities that it has. But as I see it, there's also a lot of challenges with this approach, and this is why we want to make it as smooth as transition as possible. So all the integrations that is not really differentiating you, and where making it in one versus the other platform does not matter. It makes sense to just automate as much as possible. That means you can spend the time on creating the integration that really matters, and that will make it easier for you to manage your integrations. So this is why we have a goal of making it easy to migrate as much as possible. So Figaf is about enabling you to get started with the migration. We have this partnership with SAP where we are giving part of the tool away for free that would allow you to test and manage the migration. We'll cover a lot more about these things. So it is free for you to start. We have a way you can deploy the Figaf tool in the BTP. And this is by far the easiest way of getting the tool to work, giving access to all your developers, and making the transition as fast as possible. You can also upgrade to the DevOps, and then you would be using the tool in conjunction with SAP's migration tool. The tool from SAP that is now a part of the integration suite does make it possible to migrate some scenarios. We can migrate some of the other scenarios. So you would obviously need to know both of the tools and then use the platform that is right for that specific migration. When we talk about the migration journey, there is a number of different steps in the way, and there is something that is just about you moving the integration from one platform to another. And then there is another part. This is about enabling you to test or yeah, you want to test, you want to be able to understand what is going on with your migration. And then once you have migrated everything to your development system, you will then go on and start the full transport into the production. Here's the DevOps tool. We did have a session 2 weeks ago where we talked a lot about the DevOps tool and how that can speed up the way you are delivering SAP integrations. But today the focus is on the migration, on what kind of capabilities do we have in this perspective to make it easier for you to migrate. And this is our assessment. This is our test data collection and running it on the iFlow and the migration or managing migration. All of this, or these 4 boxes here, are for free as a part of this service for 1 year, where you actually get access to understand these concepts. And then there's the part about our way of taking ICOs and or receiver determinations and convert them into integrations. Cool. So let's talk about the first thing. Whenever you're doing a project, it really makes sense to have a good understanding of what you have in the integration, what's actually going on. And I think the easiest way is this migration overview that will show you what are all the different artifacts that you have on the PI system, what has been migrated, do we have test cases for it, and are these moved into the productive system? And this just simplifies the overview and gives you an easy way to say, okay, we have migrated 20% of our integrations, or however you are in this flow. Then once you have an understanding of the overview, the other thing is you need to understand what your current landscape is and how much integration you have. SAP also have an assessment that will give you some data and some estimate on the number of the effort of migrating your integration. We do have some other data in our platform, and that is also what we will be presenting, making it easier for you to scope and manage the migration. And we have taken some of the feedback that we've received. This can be a challenge when you're migrating and adding this to this report, but obviously use the SAP report also and use these two together, because it will give you a better image of your integration and maybe reveal some of the blind spot. Because I guess that is, so here's the report, I'll just show it in Excel. I guess the main focus of these is that they are incomplete. It gives a good understanding, hopefully, but there are going to be something that is not in these lists. So yeah, it gives you a way, SAP gives you a way to estimate this. We will allow you to estimate this self. And then the idea is that you will go through all the adapter modules, all the different mappings, and understand the complexity, and thereby figure out, so can we migrate this or not, and what would be the different ways to handle this. But let me just show you what this report looks like. So when we look at this report, what we have here is the system. So you can obviously migrate from multiple different systems. We can show what are the ICOs, how we determine that this scenario is. I think it's mostly, if you actually know it as async sync or sync async bridges, those are something that would affect the migration capabilities. We can see what are the systems, what are the modules used, how do we connect with these ones. We have the protocols, the mappings. We have a field here with all the function libraries used. I think this is some of the things that is used in a lot of mappings, making some of the migrations a little more complex. We have, if there's anything we can see about it. So this is RFC lookups, etc. Oh, let me just zoom in maybe. Then we have the same for the receiver system, the different modules. communication channels, and then we have the processing, how many messages has been processed on this interface. And this is also a thing that now is in the SAP's effort or migration or estimator. And we have the number of test cases. So this is a good tool. Once you have downloaded to the Figaf tool and gone into the overview and synchronized all the PI objects, you would actually be able to generate this report, and you can select what is actually the data that we need for this. But this is obviously just before you get started doing the migration, and we obviously recommend that you do this as an iterative process, figure out, so what is it, our current landscape, what type of scenarios you have, what are the potential challenges for doing this, then migrate some of these. And obviously this would depend on the scope of your landscape. If you have 100 integrations, you probably just need a sample of like 10 to get an understanding, how do we migrate these scenarios? If you have more than 1,000, you probably need to do a small project migrating like 50, 100 integrations, seeing how these works. Yes, so the assessment give you a good status of, it's not about, not specifically about the workflow, but give you a way to understand well, I guess you need it together with the understanding of how the tool works to understand what you need to do manually. So it is not fully automated. We will not come with the recommendation, but you will need to be using using the tool to figure out, so how do we process these ones, and then go through and see, okay, these are the ones that make sense to migrate. We can easily migrate these, and then afterwards you'll be able to handle it. Okay. Next up is the migration, and this is obviously the part that both can be supported by the SAP tool and can be supported by our tool. We do things in two different ways, which means some scenarios would be easier to migrate with SAPs, some would be easier to migrate with us. And I think it's just about having this flexibility to be able to understand which scenarios you want to migrate. So the way we're dealing with this is, first we will select the ICO, the receiver determination. We will determine the routing. We will fetch all the communication channels for this. We will convert it, and then we will generate an iFlow based on all of these artifacts. So we do have some elements on the filtering that you can specify what are if you have multiple receivers, which one would receive messages with function libraries is included, ICOs with splitting is also, and then we do also try to add retries to the scenario where it makes sense in a way that makes it easier for you to manage afterwards. There is for the message mapping migration, I think this is one of the big areas that you would be spending a lot of effort on. There is a lot of functionality here. I think one of the bigger one is the function libraries. I can see that this has just been included in the SAP message mapping object. Here you can migrate also with the function library objects. And then there are some other things that is also supported as a part of this. Yeah, I guess I will cover that already. One of the things that we are going to be looking at in the future is to also do migration of EDI message mappings, because I think when you're looking at your normal EDI message mappings, they are all pretty identical. It is the same kind of flow. It is the same kind of processes. We have done some proof of concepts, and we can see, okay, if we reuse what we have, put it into the SAP's training partner management, it will significantly reduce the effort of doing the migration, because you do not need to redevelop anything. There is obviously a few gaps that you need to handle and figure out how do we actually work with these things, because yeah, it is two different ways of handling partners exchanging data. Our tool does not support that yet. We are missing the ability to test these things. We are missing a component is that some of the structures have changing a little. We will need to add that also to the capabilities. And then, yeah, we hopefully will also be able to reuse the training partner management as a part of both the testing and the development efforts. So the next part is obviously the testing. So once you have migrated, you need to be able to test this. And the sooner you're able to test the integration, the better. And I think this is the notion that the previous were that, well, you can do the development, you can migrate, and then you can let it give some functional consultant the scope of or the requirement of testing these things will not really work, because they would have time in 2 weeks, and you have migrated 50 other scenarios in that time, and then just you have to redo all of them if there is some global things that you did not want. So we want to make it as easy for you for developers to actually test once they have migrated the integrations. And this is, yeah, fetching the payload from the PI system, converting them to iFlows, or converting messages, run them in the CPI system, and then easily go in and ignore what is going on. And yeah, we can test both the scenarios that has been migrated by SAP and the ones that has been migrated with the Figaf. And yeah, we have customers that have been using this, and we actually have some other story where they've used the full suite, making the transition faster in a simpler way. Good. But I do like to show things. Good. So let's start here. So here we have the migration. The first thing is we want to find some ICOs that we want to migrate. I have one here. And before we start here, we need to fetch some test data. I can go in here. I can create a new test suite where I can fetch some messages on the system. So we'll switch to payloads that has been processed. And with this, we are creating a test case for these scenarios. And now we have 2 incoming messages and 6 outgoing messages. If we create the test case, that means we can now actually run it on the PO system. We don't need that for a migration case. And the next thing is, so once we have the test case, we need to do a migration. And to do that, we simply just give it a name, a DevTober migration. We can select the profile. We can select if we want to have the GMS retry on. We can check it, and this will give us that ability to understand everything about what is going on in the landscape. We can see how each communication channels is migrated. If you want to change these, there's a way up here to change the logic. So if you have a file processing locally that you want to migrate to SFTP FTPS, you just do it once and use that as a template and put it in here, and that makes it a lot easier for you to migrate these scenarios. We can see the receivers. If there were any of these receivers that we wanted to ignore, we can just go in and ignore them. And then we can see all the different artifacts. We can determine whether or not we want to overwrite the shared artifact or want to reuse it. Or for the Groovy scripts, if we want to use some of the Groovy scripts that already exist, or we want to reuse some of the ones that has been migrated. Especially when you come into the Groovy or the when you have migrated, there is some of the function libraries that you need to adjust. And for this to work, it is obviously important to figure out, not overwrite the ones that you have adjusted so it fits with the integration suite. And then we're getting some problems here that you need to determine. There is something about a container variable that is being used. I think in this shared artifact, we have already removed this. So just need to press check again. We can preview it. Here we can see what kind of iFlow it will actually generate, and if it is able to actually collect the data in a good way. If we're satisfied, we select migrate. This will click on the migrate. This will enable us to migrate this integration. And yeah, if questions along, just put them into the chat. So here we have the migrated iFlow. We can see the way it has handled. Here we have a multi-mapping that is being used. Here we have the error handling that is being added to this flow, and you can then go in and customize this. And here we are using the retry process about making it easier to just retry the messages that fail instead of all messages. We will save as a version and deploy it. And once we have done that, we just need to synchronize this iFlow and thereby give Figaf information that this iFlow has actually been updated. So when we're doing testing, we can see what is going on with this. Synchronization finished. So now Figaf knows the different versions that we have of this iFlow. So let's see here if we can find the Devtober fest here, the Devtober migration here. We can see we do not have any test cases for this, but we want to migrate. So we select migrate here. We select the test case we just created, select migrate. We add it to a test suite, and then we can say, if we're sending in this input message, where should we pick out the output message after the migration? And here we can say this part of this interface should be picked out here. If it is synchronous, you would have two, three of four messages that you can connect about this and see, okay, do we actually also get the response and the data afterwards? So we will say save. So now we have actually created a test case here. We can run it on the system, which will enable us to see that this message has actually been processed. So it was run here. Let's see, it is status running. We want to open the test results. So here we can see that these two messages has been sent. We can see that some of it has been processed. There was an error on one of these scenarios with the GMS retry. But when we then look at the payload here, we can see what's going on. We can see the diff here that there was a timestamp diff. We just easily go in and ignore this. And then we do a comparison again. And now we have a successful test case for this scenario that enables us to say, okay, this has actually been migrated successfully, making it easy for you to validate, okay, we did cover all the function library, all the splitting, all the different requirements for this scenario. And then you can test with the connection with your partners, but it's about giving you this this ability to actually test a lot earlier in the process. And obviously, this was a bit of a fast session about some of the different components of this, but I hope you got an idea about how the tool can be used and how easy it is to be using these things. So in our October release, we will be adding some more capabilities to make it easier to create test cases on the PI system. We found that there was a few ways that we can improve it. So with the connections that we do create there, it obviously depends on the adapter type that you would be using, but in some cases you would be required to make modifications to it. We have come up with, based on the template we have added the required externalized parameters for this. So you do not need to remember to change these. But there is some scenarios that would not be possible to do automatically, like a REST sender, where you will have a lot of different components you will be needing to add to handle the support. For the mappings, there is also going to be some manual steps that you would need to deal with. Obviously, depending on the complexity, the different function libraries that you're using, if there's any differences between the two runtimes. But I guess the best way to figure this out is actually to run the test and being able to see, does this produce the right result or not? Good. We can come back to the demo. So we obviously recommend that you run this in B2B Cloud Foundry. It is pretty easy to get started with this. And since you're on SAP Shop, you in most cases would anyway have some cloud credits that you would be able to use for this, or you can pay a subscription fee for this. And it is essentially 2 Docker images that you are deploying on B2P using Cloud Connector to get access to the PO system. And then you would actually also be able to connect to multiple CPI or Integration Suite systems and getting the data from this. With the DevOps, you can also add to Git, making some of the processes a little simpler. We did not cover the DevOps topic, which is also a large part of such a migration, because when you have migrated the scenarios, they need to be moved into production system. There's a lot of configuration, there's documentation, there's a lot of different steps that make sense that you have as a part of this. And here it really simplifies this. But we did have a session earlier, and it is also in the chat. And I do recommend that you check that one out because this is making it easier for developers to actually develop. And I think the more barriers that we can remove from developers, the more productive they can actually be, and the better integration they can be for the scenarios. That really makes sense. So I think that was all I wanted to cover in this session. I know it was a little fast, but I hope you got an idea about what is actually possible end-to-end, making the transition smoother as we got along. If you have questions, put them into the chat and I'll try to respond to those. Otherwise, you can find us in the SAP store, and there's also a number of different blogs on the blogssap.com site.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Daniel, for sharing your knowledge and expertise in this session. Now, I noticed that you answered most of the questions that are in the chat, but I do have a couple of questions that I would like to.
And on all the other sessions, you have had such a lot of good questions, by the way.
Well, let's see. So let me see if I understand this correctly. So as part of the iFlow that you created with the migration tool, it actually also includes some of the best practices that we recommend to developers, right? Like, for example, the use of externalized parameters that you show us for the config of the URLs, the additional local processes that you create for error handling and retry mechanisms, correct? So in the end, it's like sort of adopting this iFlow that was generated. Like as a developer, sometimes you don't even have to worry about this best practice because it's basically baked into the iFlow. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So
sorry.
So I guess our idea was to make it. We have some different iterations on how well we have been building these things, but this multi-process is our way of making it as easy to work with the integration, because we know a lot of this will just be sent to the new guy that would not really know what to do and how to build processes. So that's why we've put the emphasis on making it as good as possible for the things that we can actually control as a part of this.
Well, it's pretty good because in the end, it's like you're making the integration flow as robust as possible as well. You know, having this retry mechanisms is a common thing that we end up doing, and having proper error handling. I think it's also something that's quite beneficial for anyone. Now, obviously, I would imagine that you've been involved in small and large migration projects from PIPO. But then it's like, where do you see customers are spending most of the time in the migration process? So once you identified the ICOs that you want to migrate, and you run, for example, the assessment report, you sort of have an idea of the effort that's involved. You start building test cases and all that sort of thing. So the actual migration, like, where do you see customers spending most of the time?
And I think this is one of the, I don't know, quite. I see a lot of times they would be spending time on fixing these small bugs or small differences that really scale up to large things. So last week we talked with someone that had PRMs and that needed to be migrated also to build, and then that process would obviously be probably the part that would be spending most of their time for that. Another scenario, we had a message mapping that used an import to, I think it was com.NetWeaver, SAP.NetWeaver, and because that was available in the last session in the PO system, that one, when they migrated it, they need to figure out, oh, this is actually a problem. And then we try to build in some of these checks into the tool. But obviously, there is so much more that customers are actually doing than we can understand or we would be able to actually support.
Well, but that you highlight something that's very important, right? Like, for example, those sort of BPMs that there is no that might not have a straightforward migration to cloud integration, and then you end up adopting another BTP service like process automation, and obviously that adds to the complexity.
Because if it was just, let's just change the BRM call to still call the PO system, it would be pretty easy because you have everything included. But it is also, okay, you don't really want to keep the PO system just to have some BRMs rules, because it is supposed to be migrated to the new platforms.
Yeah, you're right. In the end, and even, for example, from a BRM BPM to something like SAP Build Process Automation, it's not a straightforward migration. Like, it's not something that you can just click and boom, it will be there. Like, you need to actually build all those sort of things in those new tools. And obviously, given that they are quite new, you will also have, I don't know, to upskill, for example, your developers, right, to understand those tools and see how they can interact with them.
And I think that is also part of this part about, okay, so you have an established way of delivering integration in your PO system. You need to make sure that you get also that into the integration suite, being able to deliver better, being able to use the tool for the right things.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, I see that we don't have any additional questions in the chat, so I think that we can wrap it up. So yeah, so you know what? Thank you very much for the session again. I also want to thank the viewer for joining the live event, or even the ones that will end up watching the recording after the event. So the chat is there, so you will be able to at least see the comments. But that being said, there is still plenty for everyone to learn during the TOEFest. So make sure to check out all the sessions that are part of the event. Yeah, and also check out the recordings that are available now. And that's it. Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.